Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some things just feel more important to you than others? And if that importance can actually change how you experience time? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that asks if simply associating something with yourself, even in a really basic way, can make time feel different. Think about it, your own name, your reflection, they feel intrinsically yours, right? But what if a simple shape like a square was just told to represent you? Would that change how long you think it appeared for? That's the core question this research tackles. And the answer is more nuanced than you might expect. We know that things like our attention and our feelings can warp our sense of time. Sometimes time flies when we're having fun, and other times it drags on forever when we're bored or anxious. Some smart people have even suggested that how much we're aware of ourselves might play a big role in this. But most studies looking at this have used things that are already deeply connected to us, like our own name or things we feel strongly about. The tricky part is that these previous studies might have been measuring more than just self-relevance. Your own name is super familiar, it has emotional weight, and it's tied to your whole life story. So is it the self part or all those other things that are messing with time perception? This research wanted to find out if a minimal kind of self-relevance, created by just being told something is yours, could be enough to make a difference. So, how did they test this? They ran 3 online experiments, and in each one they had participants learn new associations. Imagine being shown a triangle, a square, and a circle. In the first experiment, they were told one of these shapes represented you and another represented a stranger. In later experiments, they added a friend shape too. This learning part was just for 60 seconds, just to get it into their heads. After they learned who was who, they did a task to see if they actually remembered the pairings. This wasn't about time yet, just about seeing if they could correctly match the shapes to the labels. Then came the main event. They performed a duration bisection task. This sounds fancy, but it's pretty straightforward. Imagine you've been shown a sound that lasted a short time, and another sound that lasted a long time. Now you're shown a new sound and asked, does this new sound feel more like the short one or the long one? They did this with the shapes they had just learned. So, they'd see a shape and judge if its duration felt more like the short reference or the long reference duration. And here is where it gets interesting. In that first task, the one where they just had to match shapes to labels, they found a clear self-prioritization effect. This means people were faster and more accurate when the shape was linked to themselves compared to when it was linked to a stranger. Their brains were prioritizing the self shape. This effect was strong. But when they moved on to the time perception part, things got complicated. They expected that if a shape was associated with you, it would feel like it lasted longer. This would show up as a lower score on what they called the point of subjective equality, or PSEs. However, for the most part, this didn't happen. In experiment 1, the PSE was actually numerically higher for self-associated shapes, meaning they tended to judge them as shorter, not longer. This is the opposite of what they predicted, and the difference wasn't even statistically significant. They did find something interesting in terms of temporal precision, though. The just noticeable difference, or JND, which measures how well you can tell 2 durations apart, was actually lower for self-associated shapes. This suggests that maybe the self tag made their perception of time's passage a bit sharper, not longer. So, in the first experiment, linking a shape to yourself made people process it better and faster in a matching task. But it didn't make it feel like it lasted longer. It actually hinted at a slight increase in temporal precision. They then ran a second experiment, adding a friend condition to see if there was a gradient of how self-relevance affects time, like self first, then friend, then stranger. Again, the shape-matching task showed a clear self-friend-stranger advantage. People were faster and more accurate for self, then friend, then stranger. But, just like before, when it came to the duration bisection task, there was no real difference between the shapes. The PSE and JND scores were virtually the same across self, friend, and stranger. The researchers even calculated something called Bayes factors, which are a way to estimate how much evidence there is for a finding. In this case, the evidence strongly suggested there was no difference in time perception between the shapes. They tried a third experiment, simplifying the first task even further, just in case the previous matching game was too demanding, and somehow interfering with the time perception results. This time, they just had people label the shapes. And again, while people learned the labels, when it came to judging the duration of those shapes, there were no significant differences across self, friend, or stranger. To really nail it down, they pooled the data from all 3 experiments, focusing just on the self versus stranger comparison, which is the most direct for the PSE. There was a small statistically significant effect, but it was in the opposite direction of what they predicted, meaning self-associated shapes were judged as slightly shorter. For J&D, The effect was very small and barely showed any evidence for a difference. So, what does this all mean? The core finding is that creating a minimal, purely instructed self-association with a simple shape like telling you a square is not enough to distort your perception of time. While this kind of association reliably made people process the shapes faster and more accurately in matching or labeling tasks, it didn't make those shapes seem to last longer. The researchers suggest that this disconnect might be because the self-relevance they created was very shallow. It was a cognitive tag, a piece of information, but it wasn't deeply integrated with personal memories, emotions, or bodily sensations. Think about the rich ways we experience our own selves. Our own name carries a life's worth of meaning. Our body is our constant companion, and our personal memories are incredibly vivid. These studies suggest that this depth of self-relevance, this embodied and autobiographically rich connection, might be what is needed to change how we perceive time. A simple instruction divorced from personal history or bodily experience might just not be powerful enough. It is also possible that the self-tag was only active when it was directly relevant to the task. In the duration bisection task, the shape was just a stimulus to judge its duration, not directly. The instruction that it represented might have faded into the background, not carrying enough weight to alter the time perception itself. The study also touches on the difference between the self as subject, the I that experiences the world, and the self as object, the me, that we can think about and describe. The arbitrary shape assignment seemed to be more of a self as object tag, and this minimal form of self as. Object processing might not be enough to influence the fundamental experience of time, which is often linked to our sense of being an experiencing self, the I. Now, it is important to acknowledge the study's limitations. Because it was done online, the researchers couldn't control participant engagement as tightly as in a lab. There were also fairly high exclusion rates, meaning the results are most applicable to people who successfully learned the associations and had stable time judgments. And the friend condition, while useful, isn't perfectly controlled as friend relationships vary greatly from person to person. Ultimately, this research provides a valuable insight. Not all forms of self-relevance are created equal when it comes to time perception. While we can easily make ourselves prioritize information linked to the self, actually changing our subjective experience of time seems to require a deeper, more integrated connection to our selfhood. It suggests that while the self is undeniably linked to our experience of time, the nature of that self-connection really matters. This study is a really interesting step in trying to isolate the true drivers of time perception. It's like peeling back layers of complexity. We know the self is important, but how important? And in what ways this research, by using a very controlled, minimal form of self-association, tells us that simply tagging something as mine, in a cognitive sense, isn't the magic key to warping time. It hints that the more fundamental, embodied, and emotionally rich aspects of ourself are likely the ones that truly shape our temporal experience. It makes me wonder about other things we consider ours. If a favorite song is yours, does it feel like it lasts longer when you listen to it with mindful attention? Or if an object is a family heirloom, does its perceived duration change? Future research could explore these richer forms of self-relevance and see if they align more with the idea of a malleable time perception. It also brings up the question of whether this is something that can be trained. If we intentionally try to connect with neutral objects or concepts in deeper ways, could we potentially alter our time perception? Lots of exciting avenues to explore. So while the study didn't find that a simple self-tag makes time stretch, it's a crucial piece of the puzzle, showing us where the boundaries of that effect might lie and pointing towards the deeper aspects of self that truly color our experience, including our experience of time. Thanks for joining me on RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this as fascinating as I did, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below with your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the human mind. See you next time.